Remember when I said that code that can't be tested shouldn't be written? Directives are no exception. Another reason why directives are such a powerful tool is that they enable sophisticated integration testing against live browsers. The de facto tool for launching browsers to test client-side JavaScript in the Node.js community is called Karma. It was originally written by AngularJS core team member Vojtěch. Karma enables you to test JavaScript code in live browsers running either on your local machine or in the cloud. I have often quipped if I were stuck on a desert island with only one NPM module, I'd choose Karma. With Karma, you'd be able to write tests in Mocha and run them in any browser, even archaic versions of Internet Explorer. Much like Gulp, Karma is organized as a lightweight and pluggable core. To do just about anything with Karma, you're going to need some plugins. In this case, you have 3 plugins in addition to the Karma core. The Karma Mocha plugin, as you might have guessed, enables Karma to run Mocha tests. The Karma-Chai plugin includes the Chai assertion framework. Recall that Mocha doesn't have its own assertion framework built in. Chai includes a similar API to what you saw in the REST API chapter using Node.js's core assert module. And Karma Chrome Launcher, as you might have guessed, enables Karma to launch Google Chrome browsers locally. To configure Karma, you need a configuration file like this karma.local.conf.js file. This file is a plain old Node.js JavaScript file, but it's responsible for defining the Karma configuration. In particular, it exports a function that takes a config and modifies the config to tell Karma what configuration options to use. So this configuration loads 4 files: jQuery from a CDN, AngularJS from a CDN, your directive.js file, and your Mocha test file. Now you may be surprised to see jQuery here. AngularJS has its own lightweight port of jQuery, but this port is inadequate for testing purposes. For instance, AngularJS's jQuery port doesn't include the ability to click on an element. That's good for a production environment, but bad for testing. Therefore, you'll usually want to include jQuery for testing. Now let's take a look at this directive.js file and see the code that will be under test. As you can see, the directive.js file includes the AngularJS module and directive that you saw in the directives lesson. The test file is a little more involved. You'll learn about it after you've finished learning about the Karma configuration file. In addition to the 4 files, you load 2 frameworks, which are Karma adapters for Mocha and Chai respectively. Finally, you can also add a list of browsers, in this case just Google Chrome. So now that you've seen the Karma configuration, let's take a look at the test file. The purpose of this test file is to test the directive that you wrote in the directives lesson in a real browser. So as you can see, this test is written using the same Mocha syntax that you've seen throughout this course, the same describe, before each, and it functions. There's one key difference though. Note that there's no require calls. Since this file is meant to run in the browser, you can't use a require unless you compile this file with Browserify. These tests rely on Karma to load the necessary files that contain the variables Angular, as well as the assert object. Now let's take a look at what this test actually does. The first thing you need to do is manually create an AngularJS dependency injector that's rooted at the myapp module. This is the same module that you defined in the directive.js file. So this creates an AngularJS dependency injector that knows all about your counter directive. In particular, this magic $compile service can take an HTML string that uses your directive and compile it. So for the purposes of this course, it's sufficient to understand that calling $compile on an HTML string gives you back a template function that takes an AngularJS scope. Once you execute this template function, you get back a real HTML element. So note that you didn't have to use the $compile service or create a new dependency injector when you just used a directive in your HTML page. That's because this ngapp directive does that for you as part of AngularJS's automatic bootstrapping process. However, in test code, you usually want to bootstrap AngularJS yourself so you have access to the dependency injector manually. So again, once you execute the template function with a scope, you get a reference to a live DOM element that you can interact with in a jQuery-like way. For instance, in this test, you can assert that the directive contains the string "you've clicked this div 0 times." Then you can click the div using jQuery syntax, and you can assert that the div's contents have changed to reflect the number of clicks. So just in case you still don't believe that this actually works, let's see this in action. To start Karma, you'll use the Karma executable with start and pass it the config file. So as you can see, Karma started up Google Chrome for you and ran one test. So by default, Karma watches your JavaScript files and reruns tests every time they change, so you don't need to use gulp. Let's see what happens when you make one of the tests fail. So let's add this assert.ok false here. This test will now fail. And as you can see, Karma can tell you that the tests on Chrome failed because of the bad assertion as expected. So congratulations, you've just tested your first directive.